The Beverly Council on Aging welcomes you to our program, Livin' the Good Life, designed to explore our beautiful city and the world around us.
Hello and welcome to Livin' the Good Life. Our guest today is Peter Gilmore, a local attorney here in Beverly, and he's here to talk to us about wills and other things of particular interest to those of us getting up into our advanced years. Welcome, Peter. Would you tell us a little more about yourself?
Thank you, Louise. It's a pleasure to be here, by the way. It's always an honor. I've been practicing law in Beverly now for longer than I like to think, about 34 years.
Wow.
My practice is focused primarily on estate planning. I work with seniors a great deal. We call it elder law. I don't really like the phrase. I don't like the term. I've tried to not use it. But I work with people about planning for life, really, as much as planning for death. Want people to know that the word planning, I think, is the most important aspect of it all, that you can address any problem that you can think about as long as you give yourself enough time. So we try to encourage people to start thinking. It's very difficult. The most common refrain I hear from people is, I've been putting this off for years now. People don't like to talk about mortality or think about that, but it's what we do. I have an office in downtown Beverly on Ellis Square, which is about to get a facelift, I understand.
Oh, great.
And it's a great community, and we provide a wonderful service for folks.
Oh, good.
And not to mention, just a plug for the Senior Center, if I may. Every 3 months, I'm down at the Senior Center on it's the third Friday, I believe, every month. Just to do a little walk-in for folks, some consults. Everybody can arrange a 15-minute consult and come down and chat.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I hope to see everybody down there.
Good. That sounds really interesting.
It is.
I've gotten particularly interested in this because my daughters are saying, it's time you thought about making some plans and, maybe putting one of us on your checking account, which when we had coffee, you were talking about. Okay.
That's one of my pet peeves. It's not necessary. You don't have to do it. And we can talk some more about why that's not a good idea.
Okay,
but it just isn't.
Okay, why don't you talk about it now?
All right, well, let's talk about it now for a little bit. I think one of the things that people think about in terms of their planning is they don't want to have their estates go through probate. They want to make it as easy as they can for their kids or whoever's going to administer their property.
Right.
So they think, well, I'll just make it easy. I'll make a joint account with my son or my daughter.
Right.
My friend, somebody.
Yeah.
The problem is that you never know what's going to happen with your son, your daughter, your friend. They may have some financial difficulties. They may be going through, at some point, unfortunately, a divorce. And you find yourself then having to kind of unravel that account and explain to people that it's your money, was always your money. But it takes a lot of energy, a lot of time. So there are other ways to deal with it, other ways to do it. One of the simplest ways, of course, is to have a power of attorney and to name that person as power of attorney for you. They will then have access to that account if needed.
Okay.
If what we're talking about is how to transfer the account to the next generation without probate and accomplishing the same thing,
right?
You can talk to your bank about making the account what we call payable on death. So it's like having a beneficiary. It's the equivalent of having a beneficiary on a life insurance policy. So when you pass away, the account will automatically transfer and pass on to the person that you've named. So talk to the bank about that.
Okay.
And then certainly the other option, one of the other options is a trust of some kind. Much more elaborate, complex, more expensive option, but yet but one of the options that's available.
Uh-huh.
But I really try to make people understand that adding names to accounts just gets very complicated.
Okay, okay. So should I say to my daughter, I'm taking you off my account?
I think you should. And you can
Okay.
explain to her why. And if she has any questions about it, she can feel free to call me.
Okay.
Tell her not to take it personally. And the other thing what I didn't mention is if you're concerned about people having access to the account or being able to sign checks for you, for example,
right, right.
you can make them a signatory on the account without giving them ownership of the account. So that if there's an emergency,
Yeah.
they can then sign. All right?
Okay.
But understand if you do it that way, their authority to sign on the account ends when you end.
Oh,
So
okay,
that's
okay,
one of the
that's-
issues that has to be thought about.
Right, sure, yeah, okay. And could you talk about wills? That's another thing that
Sure.
I have one of those wills that you get off the internet. And
okay.
yeah, so bad, right?
Well, not terrible bad, but yeah. I mean, they're sort of cookie cutter, and you sometimes miss things that in the local practice are important. So that's one of
Okay.
the things. You know, when you get something on the internet, it's written by somebody in maybe in Thailand, for all we know, the way things work
Probably.
these days.
Yeah.
So what is local custom, what you need for local practice may be missing from those forms. So I think it really, everybody should go to a professional, consult a professional. I mean, you don't drill your own teeth. Okay?
Right,
You don't
sure.
go and take, draw your own blood. You go to the doctor, right?
Sure.
And I think when it comes to things of this sort, you can create enormous difficulty, enormous problem for your kids, for your heirs, for the people who are going to administer your estate by using a form that may or may not. I mean, I'll give you just one quick example.
Okay.
Somebody came to me with a will that they had actually written, a hospital bed will. Somebody had gotten it from the internet and put some stuff in there. Some of the language in the will was a little ambiguous. The will was fine. It was legal. It was lawful. We got it. It's being probated. But there's some language in there that's a little bit ambiguous and not clear. So there are a couple of extra steps that the personal representative, we used to call the executor,
Yeah.
has to go through now at significant expense. So
Okay.
could have paid a lawyer to do it, get it done right, for much less money than it's going to cost to fix it.
Okay.
And that's the thing,
Sure.
I think. So people
Yeah.
really need to give some thought to that.
Yeah.
And people ask, why have a will? Why bother? Well, the truth is that for most people, having a will probably makes no real difference in the eventual outcome. I have 3 children. I want my wife first to have all of our assets, and when she passes away, I want my children to have them.
Right.
So if I didn't have a will, the law would actually make that happen, because Massachusetts has rules that say if you don't have a will, this is how your property goes.
Okay.
And for me, that would work fine. But let's say I had a child who was kind of a spendthrift, and who I said, if I give him $20, he's going to spend it as quickly as he gets it.
Sure.
I don't want him to do that. I don't want him to have access to the $20.
Yeah.
I have to do something different. So I have a will that can have some kind of a trust built into it for him to protect his share of my assets. I can make a separate trust to do that. But if I don't have a will, he is going to get that money outright. The law says he gets his 1/3 share at some point, and it's going to be gone. Maybe he has medical problems. Maybe he has medical issues. Maybe he is getting some kinds of public support, public benefits that would be affected by his inheritance.
Okay.
So we want to protect against that. If we don't have a will, he gets the money, he gets the inheritance. Public benefits may be cut off as a result, and they may be public benefits that are critical for his health and welfare and for his life. So there are a whole number of considerations, things to think about that may affect the decision about having a will.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't want, I want to disinherit one of my kids, all right? Maybe we're estranged. We haven't had anything to do with each other for years and years and years. So I want to disinherit him or her. Without a will, I can't do that. A will can do that. I can do that with a will. Maybe I don't want to do an equal division of my assets amongst my kids because two of my kids are really well off. One of them really needs some help and some support. So I may decide to give him a bigger share. If I don't have a will, that won't happen. He's automatically, by the law, entitled to only his 1/3. Right? So if his sisters don't help him out, he's stuck. So as you can see, there are a whole host of reasons for having a will, a need to have a will. It gives me some control over what happens with my property. It lets me choose who the beneficiaries will be. Lets me choose who's going to administer my my estate. And I'm going to throw this in for those of our viewers who are not seniors but have young children, children under the age of 18 who are not adults yet in the law. Gives you the opportunity to choose a guardian and a conservator for the children. Instead of leaving that open, if you don't have a will and something happens, unfortunately, you haven't chosen a guardian, chosen a conservator for your kids, somebody has to step forward and do that. I have been practicing for 34 years, and I've seen a lot of family conflict around, pardon the expression, grandparents fighting with each other about control of their grandchildren. So you want to try to avoid those kinds of things. But if you see the thread here, the thread is all about planning. It's all about anticipating. And that's why we call it estate planning. We talk about how to manage sitting with a professional who is trained to ask questions, to suggest scenarios. What if this happens? What do you want to do if this happens? Helps to clarify some of the things that we want to be thinking about.
And I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and we were talking about if you own a house and you want to give your child that house now while you're still alive versus having them inherit it, what are the advantages or disadvantages to that?
Well, let's talk about the advantages first, and the disadvantages is the one that always comes along no matter how you do this. But some of the advantages, if you turn the house over to your child or children now, the house will not have to be probated, so that when you pass away, if you've done it right, so that on your death, the house will pass to them. Any rights that you have in the property will disappear. The house belongs to them without the necessity of going through probate. One of the major advantages of doing that is that 5 years from now, you've transferred the house today to your daughter, taken her name off the bank account, but given her the house instead. What a bargain. 5 years from now, if you had to go into a nursing home and didn't have enough assets to pay for your nursing home care, you could apply for Medicaid, for Mass Health, and the house would be protected so that when you pass away, your daughter has the house. Whereas if you didn't do that, you had to go into a nursing home. Although the house would not prevent you from getting Medicaid because it's what we call a non-countable asset in determining the eligibility, Medicaid would put a lien on the house. And that lien would have to be satisfied and paid off at some point. And we all know that nursing home care is expensive. So if you're in a nursing home for a year and a half, and Medicaid is paying for you, they want to get paid back. And it's going to come out of that house. So those are two major advantages for doing that kind of work. Now, if you're going to do that,
Yeah.
One of the things that you want to be absolutely certain about is that you retain in the deed to the house the right to live in the house.
Ah, yeah.
Okay? I've seen people not do that, and fortunately have gotten away with it, not had any difficulties. But there's always the risk that if you don't do that, and you have a falling out with your child,
Yeah.
you could find yourself living in an apartment somewhere, okay, because they own the
Yeah.
house and they have the right to do that.
Uh-huh.
You want to think about in doing this, what happens if your child passes away before you do?
Uh-huh.
Right? So you want to be sure that you don't find yourself in a situation where if she does pass away before you do,
Yeah.
you better like your son-in-law if you have one,
Uh-huh.
okay? Or that she has made some plan in consultation with you, has talked to you about some plan
Yeah.
for that eventuality. All right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise you find yourself in a position where, although you're somewhat protected,
Yeah.
you still have someone as your landlord almost who you may or may not be
Oh,
happy
yeah,
about. So,
yeah.
so a lot
Wow.
of thought has to go into it before you do that. It's a
Uh-huh.
tool that we use very frequently. It's probably not the best tool, but it's the most cost-effective, cheapest way to accomplish that
Uh-huh.
end.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about disadvantages.
Yes.
Because you really have to remember. So the disadvantages are that your child could pass away before you do, and then you want to be sure about who's going to take her place.
Right.
The other disadvantage is a general disadvantage of loss of control of the property.
Ah.
All right. So, for example, you have a situation in which you have transferred the house to your daughter. You've kept for yourself the right to live in the house.
Right.
All is great. 4 years later, you go back to your daughter and say, listen, I have a friend and I want to sort of help her out. She's having some financial difficulties. I want to take an equity loan on the house and sort of give her a loan. Extreme situation, extreme example, but
Sure.
your daughter says no, and you can't do it. Right? If you go to your daughter and say, I want to sell the house, it's become too much, I don't really want to. But your daughter says, well, this is a great investment for me. So you've given up some control of the property. Now, there are ways to work around that, but they're always a little difficult. So
Yeah.
you want to just think in terms of that. Are you willing to give up that control? Are you sure that you're going to want to stay in this house? Because there are some also, one of the other disadvantages is a tax issue. If you transfer the house that way and you keep for yourself the right to live there, and then you sell the house while you're alive, and your daughter says, fine, let's sell the house, she may have some tax issues as a result of that. So
Okay.
you again want to consult with a professional before you
Right.
make the decision to make that kind of a transfer. Have a discussion with your daughter about the goods and the bads about it.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you understand it. But it's very common. People do it a lot. And for people of limited means, it's certainly a viable option and one to be thought about.
Yeah. So one of the main points is consult a professional.
Always. I mean, and of course, I have an interest in that.
Sure.
But again, it's we some of us do, I suppose, but most of us don't cut our own hair even.
Right.
So yes, it's for a lot of us, a house is our major asset.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
And you don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And miss an opportunity that you might otherwise have.
Yeah.
So,
well, the main thing with me has been, I don't have a house anymore, but I sold the house, but I do have some of the money invested. Yes. But whenever I think about a will, I always think, oh, I don't have that much. It doesn't matter. My kids are fine as far as money. They've made more money than I ever made in my life. So I don't rush to do it. And yet one of my daughters, who is a CPA, said, you really should get a will anyway.
Absolutely.
Not that we need your money,
right.
but, you should do this.
Right. And in reality, as I mentioned to you before about having to fix something,
Yeah.
the cost of doing so
Uh-huh.
is I mean, it varies
Mhm.
from lawyer to lawyer, I suppose.
Sure.
But the cost is not prohibitive and should not be prohibitive.
Mhm.
And it will the dollars that you spend now will be of enormous benefit to your kids, to whomever you're going to ask to administer your estate,
Yeah.
whoever's going to inherit your property,
Mhm.
because it provides a sense of order
Mhm.
and direction,
Mhm.
and there are no questions about what's to be done here or how it's to be done there.
Mhm.
You've given them a roadmap to follow, and
Mhm.
it's very simple.
Mhm.
One of the things that comes of making a will and doing some estate planning with a professional is organization.
Mhm.
For example, I have all of my clients fill out questionnaires, and they're pretty lengthy, pretty
Uh-huh.
detailed, but I do it for two reasons. One, so that I can give you some sensible advice about options for planning for you,
Yeah.
but also because it takes all of your information. So if I said to you, does your daughter know where your accounts are? Does she know how to access them? If she does, that's wonderful. But if
Yeah.
she doesn't, how will she find out? And
Uh-huh.
so you have a
Yeah.
questionnaire that you filled out with this smart lawyer, and
Yeah.
and so it's there, and she knows that that instrument is there. That
That's
document
something
is there.
she actually, the same daughter
Mm-hmm.
said to me just last week, we really should know where you keep that little strong box and,
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
all your accounts and passwords.
Exactly, absolutely. And the
Mhm.
passwords, particularly of critical importance these days,
Yeah.
are your social media passwords, your email accounts,
Uh-huh.
your online banking, all
Mhm.
of that information.
Yeah.
We want you to have that information in one place so that we can get it if we need it.
Uh-huh.
And we'll need it someday. The
Yep,
truth
I'm
is,
sure.
we're going to need it someday.
Right.
As sad as we are to say that,
Uh-huh.
one of these days we're going to need that information.
Yep,
So,
right. Right.
so
Yeah.
that starts the planning process
Mhm.
and starts this sense of order and
Yeah.
the sense of you're going to lay this out for them.
Uh-huh.
You're going to be of great help to them.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I say to people, often people say, well, I really don't want to spend the money. And
Yeah, right.
and this is a serious suggestion that I make to people. Go to the kids and say, look, it's going to cost me X dollars to do this. I don't really want to spend the money. If you want me to do it, help me pay for it.
Ooh.
All right?
I like that.
Because the reality is it's going to save them a chunk of dough down at the other end.
Right,
All
sure.
right?
Uh-huh.
So, and I say that in all seriousness. And it often happens that kids will say, okay, we'll pay for it.
Yep.
We'll take
sure.
care of it. And so it's
Great.
worth doing. So
Yeah.
never say never, I suppose. Don't, and
right.
don't just give up because you think it's going to be too expensive.
Uh-huh.
Two other things as part of the planning process that we always talk about. And we can come back to wills and trust if you want, but
Yep.
I just want to mention healthcare proxies and durable powers of attorney.
Okay.
Even if you decide I'm not making a will, I'm never going to have a will, I'm never going to do that, I'm going to put my kids' names on all of my bank accounts, and that's going to take care of it.
Yeah.
And I never tell people what to do, rarely, except when I do. Except when I do. But healthcare proxy and power of attorney are must do's.
Okay.
Must do's.
And you recommend soon? In my case, I'm
Yesterday,
Okay.
as soon as you can. And the reason, looking at it strictly from a dollars and cents point of view, okay, you may spend a couple or $300 to have somebody draw up a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have those done, and you go into the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not able to make medical decisions for yourself, the
Yeah.
doctor's going to look to the family, maybe, and say to
Yeah.
the kids, what do we do? All right?
Uh-huh.
And if there's some disagreement, some lack of unanimity amongst the kids, the doctors are going to throw up their hands and say, get a guardian. Get a guardian, because we're not going to do it. I can't do it.
Ah.
So what happens is you wind up spending $10,000. Well, your kids do actually. Wind up spending $10,000 to have a guardian appointed for you,
Okay.
and then to keep annually reporting on your condition and doing all of these things, rather than having spent a couple $100 to get a power of attorney done.
Yeah.
The same for a healthcare proxy. If for power of attorney, and if you don't have a power of attorney and some issues come up, you need a conservator, what we call a conservator now. Someone who's going to manage your finances for you.
Okay.
But that person has to be appointed by the court. After somebody petitions the court, after somebody's gone to a doctor to fill out a 30-page form about why you're not capable of making your own decisions.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can see the cash register just ringing up.
Yeah.
Right? So for a few $100, done. You don't have to worry about it, because if you have a power of attorney, you really, except in really the most extreme circumstances, and it's really even, I can really never understand what they might be.
Yeah.
You'll never need a conservator.
Okay.
And if you have a healthcare proxy, you'll never need a guardian.
Okay.
And so you've eliminated those
Great.
problems.
Okay.
And
We're
that's part of the
running
process.
out of time.
Already?
Already, I know.
Oh.
I've really enjoyed this, and it's gone so fast.
Thank you.
But is there any particular point that you want to make in the next couple of minutes?
Well, I think that the big thing for folks, I think, these days is what happens if I have to go into a nursing home, and how do I protect my assets?
Yeah.
There are some ways to do it. It's not by any means hopeless. Even though nursing homes are so expensive, there are ways to deal with it. But again, planning.
Okay.
And best not to wait till you need it.
Okay.
Best to anticipate the possibility and hope that it never happens. But unfortunately, statistically, more than half of us are going to need nursing home care along the way at some point.
Right. Yeah.
So better to sit with someone now, make an appointment with your lawyer, sit down. If this is not work that they do, ask them to refer you to someone. We have an organization in Massachusetts, which is a chapter of the National Elder Law Attorneys and National Association of Elder Law Attorneys. We have a Mass chapter. There's a website. You can go online and find a lawyer. You can call Gilmore and Jacobowitz. You can do all those things.
Okay.
But just not to sit and
do nothing.
do nothing.
Okay, thank you so much. I've learned a lot.
Good.
This has really been valuable for me.
Good.
And I hope for the rest of you.
And I hope for your daughter too.
Right, definitely. And that'll be it for today. And I hope everyone has gained a lot from this show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been watching Livin' the Good Life. We always welcome your comments and suggestions for future programs. Call us at 978-921-6017.